Hello there, and welcome back to another episode of the Lazy Girl's Guide to Podcasting. It is great to have you here. If you are returning, then thank you so much for coming back. It's great to have you here. And if you are new to the podcast or the YouTube channel, it's lovely to meet you. I am Verity and I talk about all things podcasting. So on that note, let's jump straight in. Or actually, before we do, I just want to talk about this intro because you have probably noticed that I have scrapped my intro. I've got no intro, kind of like, formalized traditional intro, because this is something that I'm trying out, whereby I've noticed that quite a few podcasts that I've been listening to recently have begun having a more like traditional intro of like, hi, I'm Verity. And basically what you've been hearing previously on the podcast. And I've decided to kind of scrap that because I'm not sure. I think I prefer the idea of a more dynamic intro each episode. So I'm going to try that for a little while and then see what everyone thinks, see what your feedback is, see what, how I like it as well. And just, we'll take it from there. But so I'd love to know your opinions. What do you think about the dynamic intros? Would you prefer a more traditional intro coming back? Do let me know either by reaching out on social media, or if you're on YouTube, comment down in the comments. But what I really want to talk about for this episode is not what I was going to talk about for this episode, but I just got a comment on Twitter and I swear to God, it has shifted my perspective on podcasting so much. So I put up yesterday a tweet that simply said, on average, most people will quit their podcast before episode 8. So if you've made it to 8 episodes or more, congratulations. You've already been beaten a statistic and the odds, and then like a little party emoji. Now, somebody came back and they weren't being malicious. I took this as just being incredibly factual. So I'm not dissing them. I don't want anyone to think that that's what I'm doing, because I'm really not. I think it's a really, really interesting point that they raised, and I'm grateful to them. It is from an account called @JiveStreams, and their name is Emo Dojo. They say that they're a media production company, producers of the Jive Streams. We engage on Twitter. I don't really know too much about these guys, but either way, I am absolutely loving the reply that they gave my tweet. So they came back and said, some bands put out 8 songs and call it an album because they're not a radio station. The idea that podcasts are supposed to go on forever is really odd. Say what you need to say and then move on. Too many people create content instead of art, and how finishing your thought is the same as quitting. Oh my gosh, that is mind-blowing and so refreshing. And my response to that was, wow, I love your response. And actually, now you've said it, I have to agree. Some podcasts really work well as a short season and then it's done. Thanks for the perspective. I just think it was so refreshing and so awesome, because I think so often as podcasters, we are so used to hearing, and I'm guilty of it because I say it all the time, get to episode 8, get to episode 10, make sure you've got a structure in place so that you've got a year's worth of content. And actually, what about the podcasts that don't need a year's worth of content? What about the podcasts that are reviewing a TV series and the series has only got 6 episodes, so you're going to review that 6 episodes in 6 podcast episodes and then you're done? What if you're reporting on a criminal case and then once the criminal case has completed, your podcast is done? What if you are talking about 8 figures from history who you admire the most? Well, once you've done those 8 episodes, are you done with your podcast? Another reason I have to agree with this is I've recently finished listening to a podcast called which was from BBC Sounds. Really, really good, really interesting. But again, it was only like 8 episodes long, and it was only ever going to be however many episodes long, because that is what the podcast was pitched as when it was put to BBC Sounds. The individual who created the podcast concept only wanted to make X amount of episodes to cover different topics within that larger topic of witchcraft in the 21st century, but they actually go back to witchcraft previous times. But what was really interesting is that was only ever going to be an 8 episode podcast. So I love this comment that I got given on Twitter, or that I got in response to my tweets on Twitter, or X, whatever we're calling it these days, that, do you know what? Podcasts don't have to live forever. And this has now shifted so much of my thought process on podcasting. And it comes back to this idea of just doing what feels right when it comes to your podcast, because it is your podcast. You are 100% in control of it. And if you want to run it for 3 months, do that. If you do want to run for a year, that's absolutely no problem. If you want to be this in for the long game because that's, the way that you want to go, then that's brilliant. But this is a really, really valid point, I think. And so at Jive Streams, I'm going to reach out to them on Twitter and tell them that they've inspired an episode. But I think that it's a really, really valid point. And I really applaud them and thank them for that answer and just saying, do you know what? Maybe we need to shift. And, just thinking about that, maybe we do need to shift our perspective on podcasts a little bit and how they don't need to be these weekly episodes that come out and go on and on for years and years and years. And I think maybe when we start thinking it like that, then we can cut ourselves a little bit of slack in terms of we're not content creation machines. We are content creators as podcasters, but podcasting is an art form. I believe it's an art form. So yeah, it comes back to that quality over quantity message, doesn't it? But either way, I would love to know, what are your thoughts on this episode and also on this perspective? Because I've had a massive perspective shift now, and I'd love to know, have you also had a perspective shift? What are your thoughts? Do you need to have loads and loads of episodes on your podcast, or is it okay to stop the conversation on your podcast when the conversation has been had? If you're on YouTube, leave me a comment in the comment section below. If you're listening on the podcast, then do reach out via Twitter at VeritySongon or Instagram at VeritySongon. I'd love to hear your thoughts and your opinions. And otherwise, I will see you next episode.